So yeah, I know a lot of us in the room are writing our first novels, writing our first short story collections, our first poetry collections. So I just want to say it's so hard and so exciting at the same time. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Okay. When I introduce myself, I always say the same thing. My name is Maria, and I'm a writer from Barranquilla, Colombia. That detail to me feels endemic to myself, like my name. I am from Colombia, from the Caribbean, close to the sea, where the sun burns every day of the year and the heat is so suffocating sometimes you can barely breathe. I came to the country 6 years ago with a dream, but without a plan. I was a teacher working for a university, teaching a lot of classes, over 100 students, and barely any time for myself, let alone writing. The plan was to go to a residency in Vermont, then go to New York City for a month to take a couple of writing classes, and then go back home. I never went home after that. I stayed, and that began the cycle of applying to work visas, attempting my hand at working in the US as an educator and writing teacher, reinventing myself and my work prospects, and writing my first novel, what will become The Waves Take You Home. The Waves Take You Home, previously called A Cilantro Wedding Bouquet, came to me in January 2020 in a coffee shop in Kingston, where I was still unaware of everything that was to come. I sat down and wrote about a woman who had arrived to Colombia after the death of her abuela and had arrived at the family restaurant to see all the decay, a product of a passage of time and the abandonment of the beloved property. That year, I had enrolled in a year-long course for writing a novel and would spend the next 12 months on Zoom with strangers, tending to the deadlines we had imposed on each other. Around September, my abuela's health in real life was declining. She was a victim of a cancer that was spreading through her insides, and I was unable to leave the country due to the pandemic and my latest work visa that hadn't been stamped yet. The urgent fear that I wouldn't get to say goodbye to her made its way into my writing. My debut, The Waves Take You Home, is about Violeta Sanoguera, a woman who, after living in New York City and building a life in the States, chasing dreams and aspirations of being an illustrator, goes back to Colombia after the death of her grandmother to realize she has inherited the family restaurant and that her grandma's ghost has stayed behind, anxious to deliver a message. I put many of the interests and elements I wanted to see in the story. My love for food and narrative center around restaurants, family drama, love triangles, and the Caribbean. But the thing I wanted to explore the more ardently was our connection with those ancestors, with the people who dreamt hard for us, that influenced us and deposited their fears into us. I thought long and hard about that. Where did the fears of our ancestors begin, and where did mine? I battled with a lot of imposter syndrome while writing my first novel. English is my second language, and writing a first project feels like there's a lot of you don't know. And at times it feels like you'll never learn it. Like somehow everyone else who has written a novel until now has it down to a science and you're on your own. I wish I had a formula or something that I could replicate for the next novel. But when it came down to it, it was a lot of sitting and staring at a blank page, battling the same fears my character was facing. The fear of the unknown, the fear of not being enough, the fear of not honoring my ancestors, my name, the place where I'm from. I sought solace in groups of writers of color, workshops, classes. I kept writing and publishing short stories, looking for that connection with readers and writers. I began realizing that my fear was not mine alone. I leaned into something someone told me. Fear sometimes just means you care. I made it my mantra. I feared because I wanted to tell the story right. I feared because this story in many ways mirrored mine. I feared because I ached for my ancestors. I feared because I knew that this story would be out in the world someday. And there's no fear without excitement. When I look back at my journey, I realized there were some key components: interest, intuition, main question, heart of the story. Allowed me to break them down for you. The first thing that fueled my journey into writing my first novel was my interest. I knew I loved food, ghosts, and family drama. That was the first semblance of elements I wanted to fuel the story. That also fueled the fire of the first image of the story, that scene of the woman entering the restaurant that belonged to her ancestors. That's when intuition came knocking on the door, that first solid idea, the first sketch of a character that with feelings, fears, and goals. There was something that this character urgently wanted, and there was a backstory. With a want and a past, there's already a story. Then this led me to fabricate a story question, or what screenwriters called a dramatic question. The question that could summarize the main ordeal my character was going through. So just to break down this plane, for example, a story question could be, will Alex Skywalker, I don't know, go against Darth Vader and win? Or will Katniss Everdeen win the Hunger Games? So basically, those are story questions. Mine was a little bit more complicated because I'm long-winded. How will Violeta decide between two different cultures, two different lives, and which life will feel more authentic to her desires and wants when both sides are pulling her in different directions? And then this led to creating the world of the story, the side characters, the romance, the two cities, and the world that my characters inhabited. This also led to encountering the heart of the story. Whenever I was stuck, I would go back to that question. Does this scene advance this question in any way? Is it related? Does it belong? Combining all these elements and persevering was what led me to the story. Stories can be linear, but journeys don't have to be. When I look back at what led me to write this novel, I realized that what fueled my words wasn't all pretty or nice to talk about. Grief over losing my abuela, grief and guilt over not being able to say goodbye, conjuring ghosts on a story from the desire of wanting to talk to her once more, grief over immigration hurdles and not knowing an end in sight, and the desire that characterizes the beginning of carving a dream. The dream of building a life for myself in a new country on my own terms. Yes, it's a lot, all at once. And that's what I wanted to leave you with today. It's okay to for fear and inspiration to live in the same room. In fact, I think it's a perfect combination. It's great if your first novel contains so many themes, that sometimes it feels like it's bursting out of the seams. It's great if your first book or your first story or poem feels deeply personal. It's okay to feel like sometimes you care too much. It's okay to write in your second language or in your first. No, you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. It's okay if your first book that makes it out in the world is your third or your 10th. At the end of the day, making it to the page, even when our hands are shaking and our hearts are breaking, can be a beautiful start. A start to a journey doesn't need to be perfect or beautiful in order for it to be meaningful. In fact, I would argue that it's better if it's not. All that matters is that you make that journey yours. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. So now we are going to write. And this first prompt, I want to say, be honest, because I'm not gonna be asking you to share this portion. So we are going to be interviewing our ancestors. Think about a family member who is no longer with us. Imagine you're interviewing them and asking them questions you would want to know about them or about your relationship with them, or even the life they led before they met you. If you can, imagine the answers that they would have given you. I'm not going to ask you to share, so please be honest. So for example, I have some examples here of questions. Who was your first love? Were you happy? What was a dream that you didn't get to fulfill? Why? And we have 5 minutes for this portion. Any questions or anything we need? Awesome, let's do it. Cool. Okay, so we're gonna continue this prompt with the next one. And this part we are going to share, but obviously no pressure. using your answers from our first writing activity, free write a piece about your loved one's life or a situation that they were in using their voice. Totally okay to fictionalize or to use like a mixture of fact and fiction. Don't worry too much about themes, just follow the voice and see where it takes you. Trust it and lean in into the things they used to say, expressions they use, or even their humor. If the interview format was working for you, feel free to lean into that. Just follow whatever works. Any questions? Cool. So we have 5 minutes for this too. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so I think we can go to the next prompt, which we're very excited about. I hope you like ghost stories. Yes. And it's not even October. What a treat. Imagine that your character is a ghost and they only have a couple of days to be in the world of the living before they have to let go. What is the first thing they do? Who is the first person they contact? Totally okay to pull some fingers here in this prompt. And what happens next? Okay, so let's get started. 5 minutes for this one.
That concludes our questions. Thank you so much, Maria.
Oh, thank you all. It's great.
All right, I'm going to ask you all to please give Maria another round of applause. I can't hear Zoom, but I trust your clapping. All right. Thank you so much, truly, for your time, your energy, and just your willingness to be here with us. So as she said before, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to Maria on Instagram. Maria, I don't know why I can't make it all like together, but you see her right there. She writes. Then on Eds, Maria Alevaje. And then the email's there as well if you'd like to reach out to her with any questions or anything else.